Next, we have the federal funding panel, discussing the traditional and non-traditional funding sources to support the transition of invention from the laboratory to the marketplace, moderated by Almesha Campbell, honorary NAI member, Assistant Vice President for Research and Economic Development from Jackson State University. Please note that due to a scheduling conflict, we have 2 changes in the panel, and Almesha will be introducing our new group panelists. Please help me in welcoming Almesha to the stage.
Sean.
How are you all doing today? Good. Welcome to our federal funding panel. On the stage with me are Chaitan Baru, Alison Evans, Arti Santhanam, and Marc Singer. And to get started, I'll ask each panelist to briefly introduce themselves.
Hi, good morning. I'm Chaitan Baru. I'm a senior advisor in the TIP Directorate at NSF, Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships. I have previously served at NSF as Senior Advisor for Data Science in the Computer Science Directorate, and also Senior Advisor for the Convergence Accelerator, which is one of the programs that started before TIP and now is part of TIP. Last 25 years, I've been a computer scientist at the University of California in San Diego.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. Alison Evans. I am an analyst with the U.S. Small Business Administration in the Office of Investment and Innovation. So our office has 2 sides, as the title would imply. Investment, we oversee the Small Business Innovation Company Program, which provides government-backed leverage to back venture capital, equity, different types of debt financing and equity financing for small businesses. And the innovation side, we oversee policy for the small SBIR, STTR programs that are hosted across the 11 agencies across the federal government.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Arti Santhanam. I am the Executive Director of Maryland Innovation Initiative. It's one of about 15 funds that's administered by a quasi-state organization called TEDCO in Maryland. And our mandate is to innovate and grow startups in the state of Maryland. The fund itself, the NAI fund itself, is focused on faculty entrepreneurs and looking at technology commercialization from our partner universities.
Hello, my name is Marc Singer. I'm a managing partner and a co-founder of Osage University Partners, which we call OUP. We're a venture capital firm that invests entirely in university spinouts. So we've partnered with over 100 universities throughout the US and internationally to invest in spinouts where we share part of our profit back with those universities. We invest in both life science and tech companies and everything from therapeutics to devices to quantum computing and software and climate technologies. We have close to $1 billion of capital and have invested in over 150 university spinouts. I've been in the venture capital world for the last 30 years.
Thank you so much for that brief introduction. As you see, a very diverse panel with diverse expertise, and we're excited to have everyone here today. So let's start out the questioning. As you know, federal funding does not cover patent cost, but it does cover the cost of manuscripts. What ways can academia overcome costs not covered by grants? And what are federal funding agencies and early-stage investors looking for from researchers and innovators? And I'll start with you right here, Baru.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, just last week, we had one of our sort of leadership retreats at in the TIP Directorate. And it is our view that filing for patents should be covered. And in fact, the programs that are out there right now, there is one called the NSF Engines and one called ART, and a third one, which is EPIC. Have all, if you look at those solicitations, they all allow patent charges to be included in your budget. And there's another program called APEX, which also provides supplements to awards for covering patents. But the requirement is you have to go through some of the PFI and I-Corps programs, the entrepreneurial programs, to qualify for that. And I think we are now discussing how to do this broadly across all of NSF. And I would say the approach is basically to support activities that are headed towards innovation and spin-outs and so on, and not just to fund, I guess similar to manuscripts, not just to fund filing for patents so that you can stick it on your CV as one more publication. We want to see something coming out of it. And I think what you'll see going forward is as long as you're showing that you're on a track to be somebody who's going to innovate and go down the translational research path, then we would be supporting it. So that's going to be a change. And it's, like I said, in those 3 programs that I mentioned earlier, it's already allowable expense.
Thank you. And I know everyone in this room will say, thank goodness, because when you filed your patents, your universities or yourself had to pay a hefty fee in terms of protecting your intellectual property. So this is a good development, and I think the CHIPS and Science Act and the tech transfer provision in there really did good to help accelerate this sort of funding. So anyone else want to add to this question about what funding agencies and early investors can do when they're looking, what are they looking for from researchers? Like SBA, what are you looking for from researchers?
Absolutely. So SBA is technology agnostic. We, as our agency name would imply, we are here to support the small business and the entrepreneur. And I realize I rattled off an acronym in my introduction, which we should never do. So SBIR, STTR, in case anyone in the room is not familiar, Small Business Innovation Research Program and the Small Business Technology Transfer Research Program. So these are grants from 11 agencies across the federal government, including our colleagues at NSF, that are focused on getting technology out of the lab and into the market. So again, SBA, we are not here to tell you what you should be building, what your company should look like, but what we are here to do is to provide resources and support for those of you that have never built a business before. And so a couple of the ways that we are doing that is through our network of resource providers or entrepreneurial support organizations. So within my office, we have the Federal and State Technology Partnership Program and the Growth Accelerator Fund competition. These are entities across the United States that are building programming. Some of them are technology specific or to reach an intended demographic of entrepreneurs, whether that be women, veteran, people in rural areas, or people of color. These are organizations that have deep expertise within the federal funding agencies and those SBIR, STTR programs. So again, SBA, we are not looking for a specific technology, but we are here to support you as you start to grow that business through our resource providers across the country.
Thank you.
So if I can add to that, for my particular fund, Maryland Innovation Initiative, it's a very unique model that I think we have talked to various groups across the country where you could implement the similar model in your ecosystem. But it's a pay-to-play fund where we are independently situated, but we get all of the private, we have a diversity of fund partners. So we have the private university in Hopkins, we have the public universities in University of Maryland, College Park, and as well as smaller university, minority serving universities as in UMBC, as well as HBCU and Morgan State University, all participating and paying into the fund, so they have skin in the game. And we help de-risk the technologies by giving them giving the PIs grants to the universities, but with the very specific focus of moving those technologies into either ventures or licensable products that tech transfer can license. Our venture conversion of projects to ventures has been a consistent 36%, and our funding rate has been a very high 50%. So we do a lot of triage before the projects come through our program. We are not funding ideas, as that's the job of NIH and NSF. We are technology agnostic, so we see everything under the sun. Anything that our faculty innovators can invent, we see those technologies. We are very focused on IP and making sure that these are technologies that we protect. We actually fund patent costs as well as part of our funding program. So some of the patent cost is defrayed through our funding. And we walk our faculty through the process of commercialization. So we have dedicated staff that will work with our faculty entrepreneurs and work with them to move them along the pathway to creating a venture. We help match them with team members to spin out those startups, and then we invest in those startups as the very first investor. We do investments for the startups instead of grants, specifically because we want to use that as an educational moment for our faculty entrepreneurs to understand what an investor would be looking for, what the expectations would be, what the pace of innovation or product development needs to be to actually open the doors for follow-on investments from, say, venture capitalists like Osage. So we have had a very high rate of pulling in investors. 86% of our follow-on investments comes from sophisticated investors that are putting in follow-on money after us. So we hope that we are good partners to our investor community, and we provide a lot of validation and due diligence within our model that helps follow-on investors. So there's a little bit for the faculty training itself and helping them understand what commercialization path would look like, but there's also being the bridging gap between the innovation in the university to bringing it to the commercial space. So we do a little bit of all of that.
And the only thing I would add is to answer the question of what is the role of a patent in commercializing an invention, and in particular, what's the role of patents in a startup? And the reality is that patents are a necessity, a requirement. They are enabling, but they are not, at the end of the day, the value-creating aspect of any actual company. What the value-creating aspect is, what product do you build, and can you sell it? And so a lot of times we see inventors come into our office pitching what they're doing, and they focus heavily on the patent or patent portfolio. And we wind up discounting that a little bit. Again, you need it, but at the end of the day, you need to think about products in the marketplace, how do you build those products, and how do you sell them? And so just keep in mind both the importance of patents, but also not overstating that importance.
And Marc, I'll throw this question to you. Why should researchers engage in academic entrepreneurship?
Yeah, the real reason to engage in academic entrepreneurship is if you want to push your technology and your discoveries out into the marketplace. And so, if you look at the history of tech transfer, originally tech transfer was focused on licensing inventions to major companies. And most of those licenses wound up failing in terms of pushing technology out in the marketplace. And universities realized and learned through experience and through bad experiences that licensing technology into startups and helping those startups get funded was the best way to push discoveries into the marketplace that created products that extended lives or made lives better. And so the reasons to engage in academic entrepreneurship is if you really believe you have something special that can make the world ultimately better. And doing it in particular through startups, we think is the most effective way to push discoveries out into the marketplace because you're in control of your own destiny. You and your colleagues and your founding team it's on you, and it's up to you, and you're not kind of turning the keys over to somebody else. So we think that's the best reason to engage in entrepreneurship.
Good.
I would add that I am a trained scientist that went into investments, and so I'm biased a little bit. Our company invests in all kinds of technologies. There's SaaS and there's fintech and a lot of other technologies. But I feel like there's something to scientific rigor that makes the technologies coming through academia so much more robust. And there's also the fact that a lot of our technologies coming through academia are on the leading edge of technology. And so that's a very exciting part of what we do is, yes, there may be some app that somebody can invest in that's a quick turnaround, that's a quick ROI, but what you saw the previous panel, what we are looking at is something along quantum computing, some developments in neuroscience, neurotech. So many of those are such leading edge technologies that make it so much more interesting. And they have a broader implication when it comes to both the consumer market as well as the patient market, if you're looking at healthcare, right? So the implication for a faculty entrepreneur, a faculty in innovation coming through with all of the rigor that goes into scientific discovery and development and bringing it to the people that it would serve is so much more exciting for me on a personal level.
Okay, we just had 2 great pitches for why faculty should engage in academic entrepreneurship, but now there's some faculty who often say, hey, I keep writing these proposals and I'm having some challenges, getting the big awards because I keep getting, maybe the 300K and then now they're ready to move on. So the question is, how can they overcome some of these funding challenges? And I will start with you right here, Dr. Buru.
With me?
Yes.
Oh, well, there are certain obvious things one can say, which maybe I should say it because they're obvious. Always read the solicitation, which is an interesting thing.
Whole thing.
The whole solicitation, all aspects of it. And actually, that is an important thing. In other words, the other thing I would say is don't feel shy to call and talk to people at NSF, the program officers and so on. They're there to help you and serve you. And I'm amazed how little folks in the community do that, in the academic community. And every time I mention that, they say, oh, really, I could do that? And of course you should do that because, a document, you can only capture so much of the intent of what the program is looking for. And when you talk to the person, you get a much better sense. That doesn't mean you have an inside track just because you spoke to somebody at NSF. As you know, there's a whole peer review process. But I think just absorbing what the program is about, attending those webinars, and then talking to the program officers. But actually, can I go back and answer that previous question?
Yes.
Because I thought it was coming down to me. So this is, I have to say, and I know you're going to listen to our director, Dr. Panchanathan, today after lunch. I have to say this is an absolutely tremendously exciting time at NSF with the new TIP directorate. I left San Diego to come to DC because of that. And we, as we say, it's like we are building the plane as we're flying it. We just celebrated 1 year of the directorate. And there's very active discussions going on about, at a very sort of philosophical, strategic level as to what is it that we are trying to achieve. The TIP directorate, I have to say, is very different from the rest of NSF. And the goal is, at one level, yes, there are technical ideas that have not yet found the daylight in terms of innovation and so on. So you want to release that. That's one path. But there's also this question of what is entrepreneurship? You talked about academic entrepreneurship. And we are beginning to say that, just spinning out a company, that's only one form of entrepreneurship. In fact, there are more experts here than me on this, but, a lot of companies don't succeed, right? Or they close out in different ways than you expected, and so on and so forth. But what happens to the people who are there? And this is actually one of the things we would like to track. One of the things that TIP Directorate is trying to do, and Congress has asked us to do, is to measure the impact of what TIP is doing. And we believe one of the impacts is on the people. When you enter an entrepreneurial situation, whether you're a postdoc or the grad student or even the faculty, what have you learned in that experience that you wouldn't have if you were just sitting in the lab doing it? And that itself may actually help you be a better researcher when you come around it. So I just want to bring out that aspect that there is a human training aspect to entrepreneurship, and TIP Directorate is very interested in sort of unleashing that entrepreneurial talent. And I think, sort of latent entrepreneurism that I believe all of us have. And I mean, for example, SBA, right? It doesn't have to be high tech. It doesn't have to be quantum computing. It doesn't have to be the next big thing, which of course NSF does, all the next big things. It could be something much smaller, but there is still entrepreneurism involved in that. So I just want to make that point.
And we appreciate that so much. That's a good context to have. And Alison, I'd like to come to you to follow up the conversation that you heard here from the TIP Directorate. Knowing all the changes that the TIP Directorate is doing and what their mission is, how is SBA speaking to its audience in terms of looking what NSF is doing and supporting the different communities that SBA is funding?
Absolutely. So that question can actually kind of go in two different directions. So I'll start with the idea of the customer. We are working with our agency partners on a consistent basis. So we do that in a couple different ways through regular calls. And then I think what is most important to this audience is then how are we communicating those changes to you so you can start building your knowledge or continue building your knowledge of what agency is going to be most relevant to you if you're applying for the SBIR STTR program. So let me kind of rattle off a few resources for you all that if you take nothing else from what I say, this is where you can go kind of for your next stop for information. So first, America's Seed Fund. That is the branding of SBIR STTR. If you Google that, you will get sent to americaseedfund.us. There are a couple different things I would love for you all to look at on that website. First, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter. That is going to have amazing information on changes at the relevant agencies. When is the next solicitation for the SBIR STTR program? And to really hammer home your point, talk to the program managers. That is what they are there for, and we hear that all the time. Sometimes the most fun thing they're going to do in a day is get to talk to you all. So give them that opportunity. So in that newsletter, it will provide the dates for the solicitation, but also the dates when you can be communicating with those program managers. Depending on the agency, NSF is different from a DoD, different from an NIH. So there are going to be nuances that we try to pull out in that newsletter so you know when you can be having that communication. Second, on that website, we recently had America's Seed Fund Week in mid-May. There are numerous recorded videos that have what we call SBIR STTR 101s. That has the program managers from the 11 agencies that participate in this program. They had recorded sessions where they talked about what technology they are interested in. While SBA is technology agnostic, the agencies are not. A lot of them have a mission they need to fulfill. So understanding how they are going to be your customer and how you are helping them serve their mission, is only going to make you a more successful applicant. These programs are merit-based. They're extremely competitive. That is never going to not be the case. But when you start to understand the language of these agencies and how you can best help them achieve their mission at the end of the day, that is only going to increase your odds within this program. And lastly, I've hinted a little bit at SBA's ecosystem of entrepreneurial support organizations. So the Federal and State Technology Partnership Program and the Growth Accelerator Fund competition. If you go to sba.gov, we have a local assistance tool on our website. If you click on that, type in your zip code, it will show you the nearest entrepreneurial support organization to you. There are 40 FAST sites across the country, and we recently just awarded 40 Growth Accelerator Fund competitions. So there may or may not be one in your state. If there isn't, you can go to the next nearest state. But engaging with these organizations they, again, as I said, have deep-seated expertise in these programs and will help you put forth more competitive applications. And the last thing I will say is these organizations, we're also funding them because they have cultural relevancies to your respective community. So whether that be the neighborhood you live in, or if you're a woman looking to engage with these programs for the first time, they have programming that is relevant to you and kind of helps you speak the language as you learn these programs.
Very good, and I think this is very good information for our audience and for others, and the website does provide, that you mentioned, provide a wealth of information about how to engage with the SBI and STTR. Marc, I want to go to you because we talked a lot about academic entrepreneurship, and I mentioned to you that oftentimes when I talk to faculty, they said, no, I don't want, why are we getting into the business? I want to stay in my lab, I want to make sure that my students are going to good graduate schools, but we know why. We just talk about the importance of academic entrepreneurship. So to you, should entrepreneurs engage outside management team? And if so, how soon should they do that?
Yeah. In general, the answer is yes. You do want to work with outside entrepreneurs who have experience with startups. Just like doing research requires experience and knowledge, starting a company requires experience and knowledge, and it's not something you can just read about. You need to live it. And so our most successful companies have a structure where early on, the academic inventors partnered with one or two people who had business experience, in particular in startups. Generally successful startups, but not always. And then as the company progressed, the inventor actually often stayed at the university and continued their research. Chris Monroe, who you heard from before at INQ, he stayed at Maryland. And so usually the inventor will stay at the university, be deeply connected to the company. Sometimes you'll have graduate students move in full-time into the company, and then you'll have an outside CEO who will run it. And we think that's generally the best structure because then you get the best of all worlds. You get kind of the research and academic orientation from inventors, but you get the startup business experience from an outside CEO who knows how to hire startup people, who knows how to raise capital, who knows how to set strategy for a business. Those, again, are things that are hard to figure out on your own. Every once in a while, there are companies that defy that phenotype, where the academic inventor does become the CEO and is incredibly successful. So this is not a black and white answer, but the odds are harder that way. And so there are many more failures of academic inventors becoming CEOs and not being successful than there are successes.
Arti, would you like to add anything?
I agree completely with what Chris is saying, because we have, that's one of the things that we look at when we are spinning out a venture from one of our partner universities. One of the things that we insist is that they look for a team member that can open doors, because it's one thing to do the research and build the product, but it's another thing to make sure that you're able to sustain the growth and scaling of that venture going forward. So that's a special skill set that requires a lot of time and energy and a lot of people-facing skills that takes away from the actual technology. And so actual technology development. So that's a special skill set. And the other thing that I would add is that there's a team for every stage of the company as well. So at very early stages, you probably don't need the expensive CEO coming in. There are CEOs that can work at the very early stage that are very good at bringing in the first round of investment and opening the doors for you. And then that opens up a whole range of other team members that can be rolled in. So oftentimes our companies will have interim CEO sort of that comes in at the very early stage, sets the business plan, sets the business model, and opens certain doors. And then once the other sophisticated investors are on board, they oftentimes have a very large network that can pull in the correct team together to scale and grow the company. And one of the things that we work on with our faculty entrepreneurs is to convey that information in a friendly manner, because we are not saying that we're going to take your invention and now you don't have any control over it. But we are trying to explain what the different stages of the product development life cycle is and how you need a different skill set for each of those stages. And so we work with our faculties very closely on understanding that and working with them to make sure they understand what their role could be going forward. And oftentimes there's continue to be CTOs, they continue to be advisors, they continue to be on the board. So there are many different roles that a faculty entrepreneur can take as the company scales and grows.
All right, thank you so much. I think this was a very good discussion and lots of information for all of us in the room to take away, both from the federal funding side, the venture capitalist side of the house. And I see a question. Yes, sir.
Yes, hi. Thank you for this wonderful panel. I had a question regarding, sort of percentage ownership that typically comes out after an exit for an academic. And in my circles, I have a startup that has spun out of the university some number of years ago. And in my circle, what I'm hearing is a lot of vitriol from faculty members that they get to an exit after 7 or 10 years, and they own less than 5% of the company. Do you talk to faculty members about that and help them to understand what they should or should not be doing to preserve or reduce the dilution that they do?
I'll let you.
Yeah, so first I would say we give webinars regularly to universities on lots of topics. We've actually had a whole webinar on founders equity, which I think is on our YouTube site. And
good research.
If you look up oup.vc and look at our YouTube site, I think it's there, but I'm not 100% sure, with numbers of like what is the average starting founders equity ownership? What should you expect at the end? The reality is everybody gets diluted over time, not only founders, but we do also when we invest at an early stage. So it is a challenge. The first thing we guide people on is to focus less on your percentage ownership and more on increasing the probability of success of the company. So frankly, sometimes we find that entrepreneurs are overly focused on owning as much as possible to the detriment of the company. And they will make decisions that are not in the best interest of making the company successful because they want to preserve their ownership. So frankly, a lot of our talking points are the inverse of that, which is you want to do whatever it takes to make sure your company is successful because the odds are against you. And even if you own a little bit less, but you're successful, that's a whole lot better than owning more of a company that's unsuccessful.
To add on to that, in our program, we see two extremes when it comes to faculty members. There are faculty members that say, oh, the IP is owned by the university. I have nothing to do with it, so I don't get anything anyway, so I'm not really motivated to move that further along other than doing the research part of it. And then the other extreme is where you're looking at the exit, of 5, 6, 7 years down the line. And what we oftentimes talk about is what the cap table looks like. Where do you stand? What does common shares look like?Here do you end up? Where do founder shares go? That's something that is part and parcel of as you go from getting an SBIR grant to getting an investment. What does that change in terms of where the technology is going? One of the other things that we point out is to serial faculty entrepreneurs and how they approach that is you may only have 5% of the final equity in a particular technology that came through your lab, but then you may have about 5 or 6 of these coming through because you are a serial innovator and entrepreneur. And oftentimes that adds to your experience. Oftentimes now you have certain funds to keep your position in the cap table, and you are able to draw in a lot more investors to your lab. So all of those add up, and that's something that you can build as part and parcel of your faculty position in a university. If you are innovating, we have serial faculty entrepreneurs who bring in every year, they bring in at least 2 projects through our program and spin out a company. And they have spun out about 4 or 5 companies, and one of them is raising $20 million. The other one is not really doing well, but they have sort of, they have gained some experience from the one technology that raised $20 million, brought a different team together that they can now apply to this other projects that they're working on that they can move that needle forward. So I think for faculty entrepreneurs, it's a mindset about where do you see the most benefit and satisfaction of how you're bringing the technology to the marketplace, and calibrating that to how investors work and how investment works.
Thank you so much. I know we're out of time, but since this gentleman has been standing here for a while, we'll take his questions, and there are two behind you. We'll meet you right after the break.
Thank you. Very quickly, I'm very grateful to the I-Corps and the SBIR programs from the NIH. They're great. But keeping an eye on the end game of making the company successful, one of the rules for the SBIRs is who can be the PI. And typically the PI has these requirements that you all know about that makes it very unlikely to have a very seasoned, good person as the PI who's the initial CEO of over time. So my only comment, for the sake of perhaps improving the efficiency of the SBIR funds, is to allow the PIs of the SBIRs to early on be perhaps 50% with some think tank or something that helps you get off the ground. Because oftentimes the SBIR funds are used by companies whose business model is to have SBIRs, they have their CEOs, they have their stock of PIs, but if we're talking about the academic inventor like myself, who then has an idea, pursues SBIRs, finding a PI that will lead you to success can be very challenging. So there might be a tweak of those rules that would make those funds bloom and blossom better. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that statement, and we have our cue standing right here.